After divorcing her poor husband to marry his best friend, Tessa Harrison thought she had finally escaped the life of small apartments and secondhand dreams. The kind of life her ex, Logan Mercer, was too gentle, too ordinary to outgrow. Tonight she stood in a glittering Dallas ballroom beside her new husband, Colt, the man who'd once called Logan his brother. Laughing loudly as the crowd toasted their success, she felt untouchable, draped in diamonds, adored by the same people who once pitied her for marrying below her worth. But across the room, unnoticed in the reflection of the glass walls, stood the man she'd humiliated, the poor husband she left behind, his eyes calm, unreadable, watching every move. She had no idea the penthouse she flaunted, the company that signed her paychecks, and even the air of success she breathed, all quietly belonged to him. But what happens when the man the world mocked as broke turns out to own everything she depends on? When the husband she betrayed and laughed at becomes the power behind her glittering world? And when the truth finally rises, will her laughter still echo, or will it destroy her? The soft evening light spilled across their Dallas apartment, painting everything gold. The photographs, the open suitcases, the quiet rhythm of two people packing for what should have been a celebration. 8 years of marriage had settled into their lives like routine prayer. Logan Mercer folded shirts carefully, the way he did everything, methodically, gently, with quiet precision. His wife, Tessa, sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through her phone between sighs. On the surface, they were perfect, a couple preparing for their anniversary trip, but the silence between their words carried the faint tension of two lives running in parallel lines that no longer met. Logan had grown up in Austin, the son of a steelworker who died young, and a mother who taught him that kindness was wealth no one could take. His father's final words, "Build something that won't collapse when others fail you," stayed with him. He built his dreams carefully, code by code, plan by plan, a small software startup that he believed would one day support the woman sitting across from him. Tessa Alden came from a world that prized appearances over substance. Her mother had been a pageant queen, her father a salesman who measured love in luxury. She had been trained to smile through disappointment, to calculate through affection. When she met Logan in college, she recognized potential wrapped in humility. He wasn't rich, not yet, but he had that rare, dangerous trait, decency. And to Tessa, decency was an investment she could cash out later. As he folded another shirt, Logan looked up and smiled. "Remember when we couldn't afford a hotel and slept in the car on our honeymoon?" She gave a small laugh, eyes still on her screen. "How could I forget? You thought vending machine coffee was romantic." He didn't hear the faint mockery under her tone. "I still think it was. You said it tasted better than anything in the world." "I said that because we were freezing," she murmured, thumb hovering over a message thread labeled Colt. The latest text read, "Tomorrow, same hotel. 8 p.m. I'll handle the details." Her pulse flickered as she locked the phone. Colt Harrison, Logan's oldest friend, his former business partner, the one who had been at their wedding, the one who toasted their love and clapped him on the back, promising, "You found a real one, brother." Logan, oblivious, moved to the window. Dallas glowed beneath the fading sun, glass towers catching the sky's reflection. "You always said you wanted to see the world from the top floor," he said softly. "I still do," Tessa replied, her eyes drifting toward the skyline. "But the top floor doesn't wait for dreamers." He smiled faintly, misreading her meaning. "Then I'll keep climbing." Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her brother Miles. "Colt says we move on the transfer next quarter. Tell Logan to sign the updates." Her stomach tightened. She typed back quickly, "He won't notice. He trusts me." In the corner, their maid, Rachel Summers, folded laundry in silence. She'd been with them only a few months, a quiet presence who moved like a shadow, respectful, unseen. She had grown up in rougher parts of Texas, knew the sound of cruelty disguised as laughter. She often caught the faint edge in Tessa's voice, the way affection turned into control. But she said nothing. Logan always thanked her, always asked if she'd eaten, small gestures that marked him as different. When Rachel left the room, Logan took Tessa's hand. "You've stood by me through everything," he said quietly. "The rough years, the long nights. I don't say it enough, but thank you." Tessa smiled because it was expected. "You're welcome, honey." He held her hand tighter. "I want to make this right. The company's close to another investor round. Colt believes we're almost there." She felt the flicker of guilt she'd learned to ignore. Colt had already told her the plan: transfer Logan's intellectual property into the new joint company, then cut him out cleanly. She'd get her half in the divorce. A clean, profitable ending. "Colt knows how to spot a winner," she said, echoing her lover's words with a smirk so subtle it passed as affection. Logan smiled unaware. "He's a good man. I don't know what I'd do without friends like him." Her phone vibrated again. A message from Colt this time. "Wish it was your hands packing that bag." She turned it face down. Rachel re-entered quietly to place the folded clothes on the dresser. She noticed the faint tremor in Logan's hand as he zipped the suitcase. Love mixed with exhaustion. The look of a man who gave everything and asked for little. As evening settled, Logan lit a candle on the dining table. "One dinner before we go," he said. "No work, no phones." Tessa hesitated, then placed her phone upside down beside her plate. "Fine. No phones." They ate quietly. The hum of the city filled the pauses. He spoke of their future. She calculated how to escape it. When he raised his glass, the candlelight caught his wedding band, a symbol worn thin from years of faith. "To us," he said simply. She lifted her glass, the sparkle in her eyes rehearsed. "To us." Outside, the first stars appeared, and for a brief moment, it almost looked like love again. But beneath the candlelight, her phone screen flickered once more. A final message from Colt glowing in the dark. "Tomorrow she's yours." Logan reached across the table, smiling softly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." And in that quiet room, two futures sat side by side. One built on love, the other on betrayal. Only one would survive the night. 2 months later, Logan Mercer stood in the same courthouse where he once promised forever. The marble floors gleamed under the sterile lights, but everything inside him felt dim. Reporters lined the hallway, whispering the same cruel line. The failed husband. The poor genius whose wife left him for success. Tessa Harrison entered the courtroom arm in arm with Colt, radiant in a cream designer dress, her hair styled in effortless waves that cameras adored. She didn't look like the woman who once wept into his shoulder when bills piled up. She looked like someone who traded vulnerability for power. Logan rose quietly as the judge called the case. "Mrs. Harrison," the judge began, "you're seeking dissolution of marriage and a 51% claim in Mercer Technologies' assets. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Tessa's voice didn't waver. Her lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman with a smile that never reached her eyes, handed over a stack of papers. Colt sat behind her, his smirk small but satisfied. Logan glanced at him only once. He remembered the night Colt stood as his best man, promising loyalty, friendship, and brotherhood. Now the same man was watching him unravel, hands folded like a spectator at a play he'd written. The testimony dragged for hours. Tessa's lawyer painted Logan as negligent, unambitious, unfit to manage finances. "He's a man with potential, Your Honor, but no discipline." Mrs. Harrison carried this marriage. Carried. The word landed like an insult. When it was his turn to speak, Logan didn't defend himself with anger. He simply said, "All I ever wanted was for her to feel safe. If that meant giving her everything, I did it gladly." Tessa laughed, softly, cruelly. "You gave me survival, Logan. I wanted a life." The courtroom murmured. Logan's attorney tried to object, but he lifted his hand. "It's all right." Colt leaned closer to Tessa and whispered something that made her smile. Rachel Summers, seated at the back, noticed. She had come quietly, dressed simply, the only familiar face that didn't turn away when the cameras pointed. She'd seen the slow collapse of a kind man and the arrogance of those who believed kindness was weakness. When the judge finally signed the papers, Tessa exhaled as if freed from chains. She walked past Logan, the scent of her perfume lingering like a ghost of love long dead. Colt extended his arm. She took it, glancing once over her shoulder. Logan stood still, expression unreadable, wedding ring glinting faintly beneath the fluorescent light. Outside, flashes blinded him. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Mercer, how does it feel to lose your company and your wife in one day?" He gave no answer. Across the steps, Tessa and Colt posed for the cameras. Her laughter rang out, sharp, confident, echoing through the marble columns. She looked at him from across the courtyard, that victorious smirk sealing her belief that she'd finally escaped him. "You'll land on your feet someday, Logan," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You always said you liked building things from scratch." Colt laughed with her. Logan turned to leave, but the wind caught the envelope in his hand. Papers, old blueprints, his father's photo, patents for his abandoned software, scattered across the courthouse steps. He knelt quietly to gather them as her laughter carried down the stairs. Rachel stepped forward, helping him collect the papers. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. He looked at her, calm but hollow. "Deserve has nothing to do with it." When he rose, his hands were trembling, but his eyes were steady. Inside the courthouse, the judge's clerk closed the case file marked Harrison versus Mercer. Years later, that same file would become evidence, proof of how one woman's greed built another man's empire. As Tessa and Colt stepped into their black limousine, she leaned toward him and said, "It's over." But the omniscient truth hung in the Texas air, thick as heat. It wasn't over. It was only beginning. Because among the papers scattered on the courthouse steps, Rachel noticed one document Colt hadn't seen. A transfer deed, quietly signed months earlier, moving all intellectual property of Mercer Technologies into a separate holding company. Mercer Capital Holdings, LLC. Logan had forgotten about it, but fate hadn't. She tucked it back into the folder before handing it to him. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For staying." That night, as city lights shimmered on the river, Logan walked alone to the bridge where he and Tessa once made promises. The wind carried her laughter faintly from the distant hotel terraces of Uptown, mingling with Colt's voice, confident and smug. He stared at the skyline, the same one that witnessed his rise and fall. In his chest, something shifted. Not hatred, not rage, but something quieter, colder, more patient. He looked down at his reflection in the dark water and whispered, "You'll rebuild, Dad. I'll build something they'll never see coming." Far away in their penthouse suite, Tessa toasted with Colt, believing the world lay beneath their heels. She didn't know that the building they slept in that night was managed by Haven Tech Realty, a small, unassuming firm in which Logan Mercer still held silent ownership. And as Dallas slept, the pieces of his revenge began to form. Not in fury, but in design. Dallas had never looked quieter than it did from Logan Mercer's new window. A single square of glass in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Bishop Arts. The skyline shimmered in the distance, mocking him with the reflection of towers he once dreamed of owning. It had been 2 weeks since the divorce, 2 weeks since his world shrank from conference rooms and dinners with investors to a second-hand couch, a buzzing refrigerator, and unpaid bills stacked on the counter. He woke each morning out of habit, not hope. The startup was gone, the accounts frozen, the house sold. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The dripping faucet, the hum of streetlights, the emptiness. He had no one left but himself, except Rachel. Rachel Summers hadn't left after the trial. She'd come by the next day with groceries, quietly setting them down as if she'd always belonged there. "You shouldn't be alone right now," she said simply. He didn't argue. She became his one remaining witness, his quiet anchor. He'd met her only months before everything collapsed. But her loyalty felt older, deeper. While others had looked at him with pity or curiosity, Rachel looked at him with something rarer, understanding. She knew what it meant to lose without drama, to carry pain quietly. One evening, rain brushed against the window, tapping like memory. Logan sat at his small table surrounded by silence. A foreclosure letter opened beside him. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The TV played muted news, Colt Harrison's company celebrating a record quarter. On screen, Tessa appeared beside him, flawless in a diamond necklace Logan had once bought on credit. She smiled for cameras, holding Colt's arm, her laughter smooth and rehearsed. He turned off the TV and stared at the ceiling. 8 years, he whispered. 8 years and she erased me like dust. Rachel set down a bowl of soup beside him. Eat, she said softly. He didn't move. They took everything. No, she said. They took what you built, not what you are. He almost smiled. You sound like my dad, she shrugged. Then he was a smart man. That night she found him still awake at 3 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, old patent sketches, blueprints, data flow charts. His hands trembled as he spread them out. What are you doing? She asked. He looked up, eyes sharper than they had been in weeks. Trying to remember what I was before her. He ran his finger along one of the blueprints. This algorithm, it predicts real estate price surges using behavioral data. I built it years ago. Colt laughed, said it was too small to matter. Rachel leaned closer. And now? He met her gaze. Now small is all I need. By dawn, he had a name written on the top of the page. Haven Tech. He pawned his old watch for seed money, bought a used laptop, and spent nights coding at the kitchen table while Rachel handled everything else. Bills, errands, meals. She didn't ask questions. She just worked beside him in silence, believing before he did. Weeks turned into months. They moved from desperation to rhythm. Rachel's cousin, a janitor at a local property auction firm, told them about foreclosed duplexes no one wanted. Logan studied the data, saw patterns, saw potential. The first time he bought a property, a rundown duplex on the south side, Rachel went with him. They stood in front of it, both soaking wet from rain, neither speaking. This place, she said, it's falling apart. He smiled faintly. So was I. They spent nights fixing it up. She painted. He rewired circuits. Each nail driven into wood felt like a heartbeat returning. When he finally leased it 6 months later for a small profit, he didn't celebrate. He just looked at her and said, one down. What neither of them knew was that the data model he built would soon become one of the most accurate property prediction tools in Texas. Within 3 years, Haven Tech would quietly own 27 properties, including one penthouse downtown leased under a luxury subsidiary, the same penthouse where Tessa and Colt live now. Fate, it seemed, enjoyed symmetry. Rachel noticed the change in him, the calmness returning, the quiet discipline, the way he now looked at problems not as losses, but as equations to solve. She also noticed the sadness that still lived beneath it, the wound that success couldn't touch. One night after finishing dinner, she said, "You're building something big, aren't you?" He nodded slowly, big enough that they'll never see it coming. She frowned. For them? For me, he said after a pause, but maybe for the version of me they destroyed. Rachel looked at him a long time. Then build it right. Build it clean. He smiled for the first time since his name became a headline. As he watched her tidy the kitchen, something inside him shifted. He didn't name it, not yet, but it was softer than revenge, stronger than gratitude. Outside, the city lights flickered on like a heartbeat returning to life. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, the sound of silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. He turned back to his computer, typing code into the night. The future was forming quietly behind him, built not from anger, but from purpose. By the time Rachel left that evening, the faintest smile touched his lips. He whispered to himself, "You wanted the top floor, Tessa. I'll build the whole tower." 3 years had passed, and Dallas had forgotten the scandal. To the public, Logan Mercer had vanished after the divorce. Just another failed husband crushed by ambition and humiliation. But those who looked closer might have noticed the name Haven Tech Realty printed quietly on new real estate projects blooming across the city. Beneath the calm face of progress, Logan had built an empire disguised as silence. Every tower, every lease, every boardroom deal was part of the same invisible plan. By the 3rd year, Mercer Capital Holdings LLC controlled 27 properties under subsidiary names, 4 tech patents, and quiet shares in 3 mid-sized Dallas firms. He never appeared in the news. He let other men take the credit, Power was safest in shadows. Rachel Summers had become his right hand. The quiet maid who once folded his shirts now wore tailored suits, her eyes carrying the calm confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of her new life. She managed acquisitions, negotiated contracts, and often reminded him without words what decency felt like. They worked side by side, the air between them steady and familiar. One evening, while reviewing financials, Rachel said, "The Penthouse on Westbourne, lease renewal pending. Harrison Holdings is requesting a longer term." Logan looked up. Harrison Holdings. Colt's firm, the same one that had stolen his company years ago. "Approve it," he said at first, voice flat, then a small pause. "Actually, raise the rent by 40%. Rachel hesitated. "That's steep. Then they can move out." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. The penthouse Colt and Tessa shared had once belonged to another company Haven Tech quietly acquired last year. They had no idea who owned it now. Across town, Tessa was adjusting a silk dress in front of her mirror, frowning. The building's management had just emailed the new lease terms. Colt read it aloud, cursing. 40% increase? Are they insane? "Call them," Tessa snapped. "I did. They said the landlord's within his rights. Corporate ownership. No appeal." She poured herself a drink. "Unbelievable. This is harassment." He looked at her, exhausted. "Maybe we should sell the boat." She laughed coldly. "Sell? I didn't marry you to live like Logan." The irony hung in the air, like smoke neither wanted to inhale. Colt's company was bleeding. He'd been hiding bad investments and unreported debts. The auditors were asking questions. He'd taken out silent loans to maintain appearances, unaware that the primary creditor was a holding subsidiary of Mercer Capital. The trap was almost ready to close, but Logan wasn't rushing. Patience had become his sharpest weapon. Late one night, Rachel walked into his office, finding him staring out at the skyline. "It's strange," she said softly. "You own half those buildings, but you still look like you're on the outside." He didn't turn. "Maybe that's where I belong. I built this place from the ground up, but it was pain that mixed the cement." "Pain built it," she said, "but kindness keeps it standing." He glanced at her. "And what do you think I built this for?" "For peace," she said. He shook his head. "For patience." She studied him for a moment. "And when patience runs out?" His eyes drifted back to the skyline. "Then they'll learn what quiet power sounds like." By winter, the quiet power began to hum. Logan, under the alias Ethan Rains, acquired Colt's office building through an investment firm. Employees received a cheerful email. New ownership, no structural changes expected. The following week, an internal audit request landed on Colt's desk. Standard procedure, but its origins traced back to Haven Tech's legal department. At the same time, Tessa applied for a marketing position at a luxury interior design firm. She got the job easily. She never knew the company's parent owner was Mercer Holdings. Her paychecks, her company car, her position, all bore Logan's signature, buried beneath layers of corporate ink. When Rachel handed him the confirmation one afternoon, she hesitated. "Do you really want her under your payroll?" He looked up from his papers. "I don't want her. I want the lesson." Rachel's expression softened. "Be careful. Lessons can cost more than revenge." "She taught me that," he said quietly. Months later, the gala that would crown Luxa Vista Properties Employee of the Year approached. Tessa's name was on the short list. She rehearsed her smile, picked a gown, and bragged to Diane, her old friend, that Logan's name belongs to the past. But fate was already arranging its irony. The secret sponsor of that gala, Mercer Capital Holdings, the guest of honor, the elusive CEO finally making a rare public appearance. The night of the gala, Logan stood near the entrance with Rachel, anonymous among polished faces. Across the ballroom, Colt poured wine. Tessa laughed too loudly, and the world looked perfectly unaware. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He just watched. Her laughter reached him across the crowd, and for the first time it didn't sting. It sounded small. Rachel turned toward him. "You could tell her the truth tonight." He smiled faintly. "No, the truth deserves an audience." And as music swelled and flash bulbs lit the golden room, Logan Mercer, the man she once mocked as too small for her world, watched the first pieces of her downfall fall quietly into place. The morning Dallas woke under a slate-gray sky, the city unaware that a quiet storm was unfolding beneath its glittering skyline. Logan Mercer sat in his penthouse office, no longer the man the world once pitied. 3 years of patience had crystallized into power, and today every thread he'd spun began to tighten. Revenge wasn't rage, it was math. At 6 a.m., Haven Tech Realty issued its first eviction notice. The recipients, Colt and Tessa Harrison. The letter cited lease termination due to contractual breaches. They didn't realize the building they called home belonged to Logan's empire. Colt cursed, pacing barefoot across marble floors. "They can't do this. We pay on time." Tessa, still in her robe, grabbed her phone to call the property manager, demanding answers. "Ma'am," the voice replied politely, "your landlord is within his rights. Please direct any appeals to Mercer Capital Holdings." She froze at the name, but brushed it off. Too generic, she thought. It couldn't be him. By 8 a.m., Logan's second move clicked into place. Colt's company received a formal bank notice. All outstanding loans due immediately. What Colt didn't know was that Logan, under a shell company, had quietly purchased those debts 2 months earlier. Now every dollar Colt had borrowed was owed to the man he betrayed. An hour later, Rachel entered Logan's office holding a folder. "It's starting," she said. He nodded without looking up. "Let it." The phone on Colt's desk rang again. This time, it was his CFO. "We've got auditors asking for expense reports from 3 years ago," the man stammered. "Something about embezzlement inquiries." Colt's hand tightened around the receiver. "Who filed it?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "Anonymous tip, but it came from a Dallas IP. Looks internal." By noon, headlines appeared on business blogs. Dallas CEO accused of defrauding partner during company split. Beneath the title was a photo. Tessa and Colt laughing outside the courthouse years ago. The article detailed their alleged misconduct during Mercer Technologies' transfer, complete with screenshots of internal emails Colt thought he'd deleted. When Tessa saw it, she turned pale. "This is a hit job," she whispered. "Someone's coming for us." At 2 p.m., a courier arrived at their penthouse. Inside the envelope, 2 DNA results. Both revealed that the children Tessa claimed as Logan's before the divorce were fathered by different men. One by Colt, the other by a married investor she'd once courted for a deal. Colt read the papers twice, his face drained. "You lied to me." "You think you're innocent?" she shot back. "You used him too." The argument shattered what little facade remained. That same afternoon, a court order froze all their assets pending investigation into misappropriated corporate funds. Their joint accounts were locked. Tessa's credit cards declined at a boutique. She threw her purse in frustration, humiliated in public for the first time. Logan didn't watch the chaos unfold. He orchestrated it and waited for the echoes. Rachel found him later reviewing stock charts. "You've broken them," she said quietly. He didn't answer. By evening, Mercer Capital filed a civil lawsuit for fraud, defamation, and breach of trust. The judge assigned to the case was the same man who had presided over Logan's divorce. When the documents were served, Colt nearly collapsed. Within a week, every layer of their world peeled away. The society pages that once praised Tessa's beauty and Colt's ambition now printed their disgrace. "Socialite couple under fraud investigation," read one. Sponsors withdrew. Invitations stopped. Their friends evaporated faster than their money. At Colt's firm, panic spread. Investors pulled out when a sudden stock drop revealed Logan's final card. His firm had acquired controlling shares through third-party accounts. That morning, Colt's access card stopped working. Security escorted him out of his own building. Meanwhile, federal agents raided his office, seizing computers and documents. Miles Alden, Tessa's brother, was arrested for laundering Logan's stolen funds. Tessa watched her brother's mugshot flash across the evening news and knew her last defense had vanished. Then came the public humiliation. Their penthouse, once their symbol of triumph, was repossessed under Haven Tech's order. The eviction unfolded in daylight, photographers capturing the scene as movers carried furniture past the crying woman in a silk robe. The signature at the bottom of the notice, Logan Mercer. Tessa's knees gave way. Colt stormed into the hallway shouting, "He can't do this! He can't!" But Logan already had. Every strike had been legal, patient, perfect. Weeks later, they stood before the same judge, desperate for mercy. Logan sat across from them, calm, composed, as the court clerk read the charges. The judge looked at him and then at them. "Mr. Mercer, I believe justice has found its way home." When the verdict came, full damages awarded to Logan, $48 million, the courtroom erupted in gasps. Cameras flashed. Tessa sobbed into her hands. Colt stared blankly at the floor. Outside, reporters crowded around. Tessa tried to reach Logan as he left. "Logan, please!" He turned once, eyes cool. "You meant every word when you laughed that day, Tessa. I just gave your laughter a price." He walked away without another glance. That night, Rachel found him standing on the balcony of his tower. "It's over," she said softly. He didn't turn. "No, it's finished. There's a difference." Below them, the city gleamed. His city now. The empire born from pain stood unshakable. In a quiet apartment miles away, Tessa stared at her reflection in a darkened window. She had traded kindness for conquest and lost both. The world she once owned now belonged to the man she destroyed. The courtroom was packed before sunrise. Reporters, investors, and faces that had once turned away from Logan Mercer now waited for the fall of the couple who had mocked him. The trial of Mercer, Capital Holdings versus Harrison Industries, had become the city's obsession. Dallas Morning Ledger called it retribution in a three-piece suit. Logan arrived quietly. No entourage, no arrogance, just the same calm stillness he'd carried since the day everything broke. Tessa entered moments later, trembling behind her designer sunglasses. Colt followed, unshaven, gray around the eyes, the confident charm long gone. The air was thick with whispers. Everyone knew what this trial meant. It wasn't just business. It was history coming full circle. When the judge entered, silence fell like a closing curtain. Judge Benjamin Cole had aged since the divorce case years ago. He recognized Logan immediately. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, and in that single look, the judge understood. Life had written its verdict long before this day. "Mr. Avery," Judge Cole said, nodding to Logan's attorney. "You may begin." Thomas Avery rose. "Your Honor, my client seeks restitution for theft of intellectual property, fraudulent transfer of business assets, and deliberate defamation orchestrated by Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. Over 3 years, they profited from code and algorithms developed solely by Mr. Mercer, now valued in excess of $80 million. The defense lawyer tried to interrupt, but Avery continued. "We will show documented proof that Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Harrison concealed ownership of stolen assets through shell corporations, falsified contracts, and redirected funds from Mercer Technologies to Harrison Industries without the plaintiff's knowledge." The first exhibit projected onto the screen, scanned documents bearing Tessa's and Colt's signatures. Tessa's throat went dry. Every page illuminated her greed under the courtroom lights. Logan watched quietly, not triumphant, detached, as if watching the past confess itself. Tessa whispered to Colt, "You said this couldn't trace back." He didn't answer. His hands were shaking. Hours passed. Witnesses testified, accountants, former employees, even Miles Alden via video call from prison. Each confirmed what Logan already knew. The betrayal wasn't a single act. It had been a campaign. Then came the moment everyone waited for. "Call Mr. Mercer," the attorney said. Logan stood and walked to the witness stand. Every camera in the room clicked. He took the oath with the same steady calm he'd once used to say, "I do." "Mr. Mercer," Avery began, "you were once married to Mrs. Harrison, correct?" "Yes." "And Mr. Harrison was your business partner?" "He was." "When did you become aware that your company had been stolen from you?" "The day I lost everything," Logan said evenly. "At the time, I thought it was fate. Later, I learned it was friendship." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Avery nodded. "And did you retaliate?" Logan's gaze lifted to Tessa, then to Colt. "Not immediately. I built. That's all I know how to do. But this time, I built differently." Differently how? I built so the foundation couldn't be taken. I built so the truth would always be part of the structure. A hush swept through the room. Even Judge Cole leaned forward slightly. Avery held up the final document, a corporate registry form. This, he said, proves that Haven Tech Realty, Luxa Vista Properties, and Mercer Capital Holdings are all legally owned and operated by Mr. Mercer. Through them, he controls assets previously transferred to the defendants, including, Your Honor, the penthouse currently leased by Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. The crowd gasped. Tessa's breath caught. Colt whispered a curse under his breath. Judge Cole removed his glasses. Is that accurate, Mrs. Harrison? Tessa's voice shook. I didn't know. Logan's calm gaze met hers. You didn't care to know. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. Colt slammed his fist on the table. You set us up. Logan turned to him. No, you walked into what you built. I just left the lights on. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Cole banged his gavel. Order! When the verdict came hours later, it felt inevitable. The defendants were found guilty of willful fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and malicious defamation. All assets seized, all damages awarded. Tessa's sobs filled the air as Colt sank into his chair, broken. Logan stood silently. The judge spoke one last time. Mr. Mercer, you've demonstrated restraint, intelligence, and grace under circumstances that would destroy most men. The court commends you. Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison, greed has a price. You are free to count it. Outside, the steps of the courthouse shimmered in afternoon light. Reporters swarmed, shouting his name. Logan ignored them. Tessa stumbled behind. Mascara streaked, voice hoarse. Logan, please, she cried. I was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. He stopped only once. You knew exactly. You just thought I'd never matter enough to fight back. He turned, walked down the marble steps, and disappeared into the waiting car. Rachel sat inside, hands folded in her lap. Did it help? She asked. He looked out the window at the fading courthouse. No, but it's done. The city moved around them. Traffic, sirens, noise. But inside the car there was only silence. The war had ended, but victory felt strangely heavy. As the sun sank behind the skyline, Logan's reflection merged with the city's glow. Justice was his, but peace, that was still waiting to be found. The rain returned to Dallas 2 months after the verdict, soft and cleansing, as if the city itself needed to wash away the memory of everything that had unfolded. Logan Mercer stood in the glass-walled office of his new headquarters. Not the tallest tower, but the one that mattered. From here he could see the courthouse dome in the distance, the same place where his life had broken and rebuilt itself twice. He should have felt triumphant. The newspaper still carried his story. The quiet billionaire who outsmarted his betrayers. Financial blogs called him the man who turned heartbreak into empire. But fame didn't touch him. After so many years of fighting ghosts, he'd forgotten how to live without them. Rachel Summers walked in quietly as she always did, holding 2 cups of coffee. You've been standing there for an hour, she said gently. He smiled faintly. I used to imagine what it would feel like to win. Turns out, it's quiet. Rachel studied him for a moment. She'd seen him rise from nothing, seen the nights he coded until sunrise, the mornings he went to court wearing the same suit because he couldn't afford another. She had never seen him at peace, only moving from one battle to the next. You built everything back, she said, but you haven't built anything for yourself. He turned toward her. You think I don't know that? I think you do, she said softly. I think you just don't know what peace looks like anymore. Outside, the city lights blinked on, one by one, reflecting off the rain-slicked streets. Logan turned back to the window. Peace feels strange. I don't owe anyone pain anymore. I don't even owe her hate. Rachel smiled faintly. That sounds like forgiveness. He looked at her, the words lingering. Forgiveness, a word heavier than revenge. They stood in silence for a while before she said, The foundation is ready. The Mercer Foundation, she nodded. First scholarship launches next month. Single mothers, small business grants, tech apprenticeships, all in your name. He frowned. In our name. You started it. I managed it, she corrected. You gave it life. He exhaled slowly. It's strange. I spent half my life proving something to people who aren't even watching anymore. She met his gaze. Then stop proving. Start giving. For the first time, he laughed softly, the sound of someone remembering how. Later that night, they shared dinner in the Penthouse kitchen, the same one where he once ate alone, staring into silence. There were no wine glasses, no candles, just 2 plates of simple food and the hum of quiet music. I don't think I've ever seen you laugh, Rachel said, smiling. You saw me when I was broken. Laughing wasn't on the schedule. She reached for her glass. Then let's rewrite the schedule. He looked at her, really looked, and realized that peace didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in quietly, disguised as someone who stayed when everyone else left. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. The city found new scandals. Logan spent his mornings at board meetings, his afternoons visiting new projects under the foundation's name. Rachel was always nearby, not as an assistant now, but as a partner. People noticed how he listened when she spoke, how his eyes softened when she entered the room. One evening, he found her sitting in the courtyard of the foundation building, watching children play in the rain. They remind me of you, she said when he approached, always building something from scraps. He smiled. And you remind me of what I was building for. She turned, surprised by the tenderness in his voice. I lost everything, he said quietly, and found you in the ruins. Maybe that's what it was all for. They sat in silence, rain whispering against the pavement. For once, there was no plan, no strategy, no revenge, just peace. Weeks later, under the pale lights of a courthouse hallway, the same courthouse that once witnessed his humiliation and his justice, Logan stood beside Rachel in front of a county clerk. There were no photographers, no headlines, no champagne, only 2 signatures on a marriage license and a quiet smile from the clerk. As they stepped outside, Rachel looked up at the building's stone facade. Strange place for a wedding, he smiled. No, perfect place. This is where I lost everything. Now it's where I start again. That evening, they returned to the penthouse. The air was warm, golden, filled with light. Logan poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. To peace, he said. To beginnings, she answered. They clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, Logan's reflection in the window didn't look haunted. It looked whole. Outside, Dallas glowed beneath the night sky, a city that had watched him fall and rise, a city he no longer needed to conquer. Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. You think she ever thinks of you? He didn't hesitate. Maybe, but I think of her less every day. She smiled. That's how you know you're free. He kissed her forehead, watching the city lights shimmer like forgiveness. No, he whispered. That's how I know it's finally over. 1 year later, the Dallas skyline shimmered beneath a velvet dusk, 1,000 golden lights flickering like memories refusing to fade. From the balcony of their penthouse, Logan and Rachel Mercer watched the city breathe. The empire he had rebuilt now moved without him. Foundations running programs, executives leading expansions, properties flourishing across states. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing anything. He was living. Inside, the television played softly, a news anchor's cheerful voice filling the quiet. Tonight, Mercer Capital celebrates its 5th anniversary, marking one of the most remarkable business turnarounds in modern Texas history. CEO Logan Mercer and his wife, Rachel, have pledged an additional $25 million to the Mercer Foundation, expanding scholarships for women and single parents statewide. Rachel smiled, turning down the volume. You know you've officially become a headline, right? He chuckled, leaning on the railing. Let them write what they want. The only story that matters is the one no one sees. Which is? She asked. He looked out over the glittering sprawl of Dallas. That peace isn't the opposite of power. It's what power should protect. She slipped her hand into his. That sounds like something your father would have said. He nodded. Maybe he's the one who taught me the long way around. Across town, in a small convenience store, lit by a single buzzing bulb, Tessa Harrison counted change behind the counter. Her once manicured hands now bore faint calluses. The tabloids no longer remembered her name. The world had moved on. She lived in a one-room apartment above the store, its cracked walls whispering reminders of everything she'd lost. Some nights, she still dreamt of that courthouse, of marble floors, camera flashes, and the sound of her own laughter, echoing back like punishment. That evening, she switched on the small TV behind the register, just as Logan's interview played. He was smiling, calm, handsome, radiant beside Rachel. The ticker below read, Mercer Capital's Billionaire CEO expands Dallas Philanthropy Network. Tessa stared, transfixed. He looks different, she murmured. Peaceful. The store owner, an older man stacking boxes, glanced up. You know him? She forced a smile. I used to. He shrugged. Seems like a good man. She turned away, eyes blurring. Outside the window, a black Rolls-Royce glided past in the rain, its reflection rippling across the glass. She didn't know it, but Logan sat inside that car. On the opposite side of the street, he glanced out absent-mindedly and saw her, standing behind the fogged window, older, thinner, hollow-eyed. For a fleeting second, time rewound. The candle-lit dinners, her laughter, her betrayal. He exhaled softly, the ache fading into memory. Rachel noticed his expression. You okay? He nodded slowly. Yeah, just remembering who I used to be. You don't miss it, do you? He looked out at the rain again. No. I don't miss being broken, but I don't hate it either. It's what made this possible. He didn't mention what he'd seen, and she didn't ask. Some ghosts deserve silence more than pity. As the car moved forward, the faint reflection of Tessa's face vanished in the dark window. Behind her, the flicker of the television screen dimmed, leaving her surrounded by shadows. She whispered almost to herself, If I had known, if I had stayed. But the words died before they reached the air. Regret had no audience now. Later that night, the Mercers arrived at the gala. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, filled with laughter and grace. Reporters approached, but Logan spoke briefly. We build to leave something better behind. Wealth is borrowed. Legacy is earned. The crowd applauded. Rachel looked at him, pride softening her features. You really mean that, don't you? I used to think revenge was the final victory, he said quietly. Now I know forgiveness is. As the music swelled, they walked to the balcony together. Below them, the city sparkled. Not as a battlefield anymore, but as proof that pain could evolve into purpose. Rachel leaned against him. If she walked past you today, would you forgive her? He thought for a moment. I already did. That's why I can stand here. She smiled. Then what do we build next? He turned to her, eyes warm. Something that outlives revenge. The music from inside drifted out, a slow jazz tune echoing over the skyline. He took her hand and led her into a dance, their silhouettes framed against the city lights. Below, the streets glistened from rain. One window in the city glowed softly, the penthouse where love had replaced vengeance. Another across the river flickered dimly, the convenience store where regret lived quietly, unseen. 2 windows, 2 lives, same city. As the camera of fate pulled back, Dallas became a constellation of lights, each one carrying a story of loss and rebirth. And in that moment, the omniscient truth settled like a whisper on the wind. Betrayal had built his empire. Forgiveness built his eternity.